Are you tired of the same adult animated shows being full of crude humor, uninspired references, and predictable storytelling? Sick of having to come home to 5 more seasons of Big Mouth? Do you wish there was a series out there that redefines what it means to be adult animation? Then I have just the show for you. HBO Max just doesn't want you to see it. Instead, they're hoping you never see it so they can cancel it after 1 season and write it off for tax purposes, unable to show its face on a streaming service ever again. This is Fired on Mars, an HBO Max original series created by Nate Sherman and Nick Vokey, based off a 2016 short by the same name. My boy Johnny Two Cellos put it best when he said it's like Infinity Train meets King of the Hill meets Severance meets Last Man on Earth. But I haven't seen that last one. It's also the first project by Pat and Mike Productions. Now, why do you care about that name? Well, because this studio was founded by the former senior vice president of Cartoon Network Studios, Brian A. Miller, and features other talent from Cartoon Network on their roster. On the surface, Fired on Mars is centered around Jeff Cooper, a man working for a mega corporation by the name of Marsley, which has recently sent him to Mars to live on their exciting new colony. Now, Jeff thinks he has it all. A fulfilling career as a graphic designer, a steady relationship with his girlfriend Hannah, plans to start a family. What more do you need? But the truth is, Jeff is a bit of a loser who desperately wants to be recognized as valued talent at Marsley to preserve his own ego. His graphic design work is mid. He's surrounded by people who loathe him, and it's pretty obvious when he's trying to compensate for these things. And all of his flaws are really brought to the forefront after he's, you guessed it, fired on Mars. Which starts up a very sad cycle of Jeff trying to give himself a purpose within this colony as he has to juggle new jobs, new friends, and new responsibilities, all while combating Marsley's psychological warfare and his own ego. Also, there's a mysterious sleep tank that Marsley hosts her laid-off employees in for months if not years at a time for reasons unknown. And it's not exactly a place you want to end up in, given that the negligence of Marsley's own doctors means you're at risk for straight up dying in the tank, which happened to Jeff for a few minutes, but it's okay. They swept it under the rug by giving him a brand new internship. And although Jeff has his own flaws, you're really rooting for him when you watch him go up against this mega corporation that does not give a fuck about anyone. Now, you may be hearing all of this and think, Kevin, this doesn't sound very funny. And you're right. Rest be assured, Fired on Mars does come packing with the jokes. Though if you ask me, a lot of charm really comes from its characters. And this show does have some pretty fun characters to balance out the sad vibes.
I know you're sad, but quit being fucking stupid.
I got enough plutonium to bring this whole place down around us like...
Jax and Sluggo in particular are the best characters who will stick out in your mind when thinking about this show. They both actually become 2 of Jeff's really good friends, which makes some developments in the back half of the season heartbreaking.
I'll just go fuck off and suck a dead dog's dick.
Suck a what?
But yeah, comedy isn't the main focus of the show, and frankly, it shouldn't be. I am so sick of every adult animated series having to sell itself as a comedy to get anywhere, and make no mistake, this show was initially pitched as a workplace comedy. Technically not wrong, but best case scenario for me. But that's also why I had zero expectations for the show going in. I thought it would just be another episodic try-hard comedy that thinks raunchiness is the only thing that the medium and demographic is capable of. And instead, I got one of my favorite shows of the year by far. One of the best HBO Max originals by far. The focus of Fired on Mars isn't the comedy, it's focused on Jeff's journey of self-preservation in a place that treats all of its employees as disposable.
Well, is she dead?
Let's just say she'll be giving notes remotely. For a time, but, she's a real great person. Anyway,
it's focused on the drama, the characters, and building a narrative that we really haven't seen in Western animation. It's refreshing to have an HBO Max cartoon that feels like an HBO show, instead of something that just got dumped on the platform because plans fell through elsewhere. I could gush about this show for a while. How it relishes visual storytelling, sprinkling in ambient moments that speak for itself, the sci-fi elements that naturally come from a story set on Mars, even the way it's written really stands out to me. Like, let's look at Jeff's girlfriend Hannah, for example. Hannah is still on Earth, having much better luck at her career and social life than Jeff, and her boss clearly has the hots for her. She knows Jeff has to get his shit together, but she also still cares about him, and you can tell she genuinely wants long distance to work. But that distance between them and the pressure of having to pick up her life and move to Mars is clearly adding more friction to their relationship. At the end of the first episode, Jeff tries to dodge going into the tank by making a break for it, but right before he can leave the colony, he gets a butt dial from Hannah. A FaceTime no less. So many other adult cartoons, hell, TV in general, would have had some raunchy revelation that Hannah is indeed fucking her boss and cheating on Jeff. But Fired on Mars is built different. Instead of the Cuck Olympics, we see that Hannah is looking for advice on her relationship because she knows Jeff has a lot of growing up to do, but she doesn't know if moving to Mars is the right call. Ultimately, she ends up breaking things off 2 episodes later after Jeff goes into the tank twice, with the tank getting destroyed the second time by Jax.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
I can't believe something so normal would be refreshing to see in adult animation, but it really is. Hannah wasn't even in the wrong for dumping Jeff, because at this point, even though it was out of his control, he was absent in her life for months at a time. That's going to take a toll on both people in the relationship. Well, I mean, Jeff was unconscious for all of it, but in a normal relationship, it would impact both parties. And it doesn't help that their superiors summed up the horrors of the tank as a spa to Hannah.
Then Darren told me you were in some kind of a spa?
What? No, it was a tank. It was a sleep tank.
But before I spoil the whole show, I want to focus on how HBO Max has been treating the series because, my god, has this treatment been nothing short of stinky. And I really just want to highlight their poor treatment of the series and why I think they're sabotaging it so hard. And why one of those reasons is Pete Davidson. Fired on Mars didn't get any sort of acknowledgement by HBO Max until 3 days before its premiere. For comparison's sake, they've been advertising the new Clone High for well over a month now. And that premieres at the end of May. When the show did premiere, they barely posted about it on their social media, and haven't posted about it since its debut, despite 2 episodes dropping weekly. When it premiered, only some HBO Max users had the show in its little front page highlight carousel. I know some users didn't, because I didn't. But I saw it on the front page of other people's profiles. Mine eventually did get added to the rotation, but only for a day or 2, and that was already a few days after the premiere. And in the weeks after release, any promotion for the show has basically been non-existent. You'll be lucky to get an ad for it before watching another show on the platform. Now look, I'm not asking for Barry or Succession levels of treatment here, but obviously people aren't going to find the show if it's not even mentioned by HBO Max while new episodes are rolling out. They did the bare minimum to show there's proof of some advertisement, but not nearly enough to support the show long term. Despite this, the show is getting some eyes on it. It was the 2nd most watched animated series on HBO Max worldwide, the week of April 30th. But even then, worldwide hit oddly doesn't translate to a hit in the United States. And I feel like those are the metrics they'll use to justify cancellation or a 2nd season. But given HBO Max's track record of canceling shows like Infinity Train and Close Enough, the president himself could demand another season, and they'd still cancel it. Granted, I don't think most people will listen to the president anyways.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was gonna
So why are they doing the show dirty like this? First off, I truly believe that HBO Max wants little to nothing to do with animation going forward. Once they rebrand to merch! God, this really went from one of the best streaming services to one of the most mid in the span of a year. 2 years ago, they had a slate filled to the brim with exciting adult animated series. And, Velma. But the only shows to come out of the other side were Velma, Clone High, and Fired on Mars. There's been absolute radio silence on these other projects, so I'm just assuming they're all canceled. Animation is expensive, often more expensive than the average live-action sitcom or drama. and it's still insanely stigmatized, with a lot of people regarding it as a childish medium. Of course, shows like Fire on Mars could help destigmatize animation in the West, but I don't think HBO Max wants that. I think they know this show could go a long way, but if it gets attention and then they cancel it, the backlash is going to be a lot more vocal than if they keep their current approach. Because as it stands right now, if they canceled it next week, most people would go, "Oh, I didn't hear about this show, so I'm not surprised it got canceled." Which is exactly what I think they're banking on. Max is owned by Warner Discovery after all, a corporation in massive debt, and has put animation on the chopping block in an attempt to crawl out of that debt. Another reason why I think they're burying Fire on Mars revolves around the themes in the show, namely in the back half of the season. More spoilers ahead, but Jeff ends up stumbling upon a secret collective of Marcy employees who became disillusioned with the corporation and want to get back to the original goal of life on Mars, planning to leave Marcy's colony in favor of starting their own. They just need to find water first. Now, when you're watching these episodes, especially right now, during a time of very intense politics in the entertainment industry, I'm assuming we're all aware of the writer's strike, you're definitely going to pick up on the themes of community and unionization. A big aspect of the writer's strike right now is that streaming is still considered new media, despite being around for 10 years at this point. And long story short, people are getting paid less than they should be and not receiving royalties. HBO Max, being a streaming service, probably doesn't see it in their best interest to promote a show that's actively calling out corporations like them. You show this to Davey Zaza, and he'll be quaking in his boots. And last but not least, there's reason number 3, Pete Davidson. Please, let me enlighten y'all. When Fire on Mars was first picked up, Pete's name was attached for maximum star power. This headline is kinda nuts looking back at it. Pete Davidson to star in Fire on Mars, an HBO Max animated comedy about tech bros in space. This makes you think the show would be about tech bros when the tech bros are the antagonist and Pete's character isn't even one of them. But wait a minute, Pete Davidson is in the show? How come he isn't listed in any credits? Well, I think we may have an answer, folks. For those who have watched the series and are familiar with Davidson, it's very obvious that he voices the character Martin, who, surprise surprise, doesn't have a voice actor listed on IMDb. But why? Now, I don't like using sources that I don't know are credible, but a comment on the Fire on Mars subreddit kinda makes a lot of sense. When someone created a thread to ask about Davidson's involvement with the series, a user stepped forward and claimed that Davidson got mad when he was asked back to do some extra dialogue and quit the show, according to an off-the-record source. I'ma keep it a buck. I know people lie on the internet all the time, but I can't see someone running to the Fire on Mars subreddit that has less than 400 users in it and come up with a bullshit reason as to why Davidson's name isn't attached. Even if that's not the exact story, there being some bad blood between Davidson and the production makes sense, considering that he wasn't supposed to be just a voice actor, but also an executive producer. And again, his name isn't attached anywhere on the show. And that is a huge hit to HBO Max, because that's less star power they have to market this show. I bet they would have plastered this show everywhere if Davidson's name was still attached. They probably would have tried to spun it as his show if he maintained an executive producer credit, like how so many people think Alex Hirsch created Inside Job, or had more to do with it than he actually did. So you have an expensive to produce TV series that a fair share of consumers will blindly write off just because it's animated, themes of unionization, which is scary to the big shots over at Max, and no Pete Davidson to bait college students into watching. I don't agree with any of these points, but I do think this is enough for HBO Max to selfishly bury the series. As of the week I'm making this video, the final 2 episodes of the season are going to debut on the platform. So if you've already been watching, or are curious in the show and want to see it succeed, be sure to tune in. I think after the season is over, numbers will matter more than ever. And it'd be awesome to raise enough awareness to the point where the whole season gets a lot more attention than it has been. So spread the word. Even though I had screenage for the whole first season, and binged it all in one sitting, I've been watching with friends every week, and I love seeing their reactions. I truly believe this show is something special. Please check it out. Please support it. Don't let HBO Max get away with how they've been treating it. But as always, these are just my thoughts, and I would love to hear yours. What do you think about Fired on Mars? Have you checked it out yet? Do you want to see a season 2? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and keep the conversation going over at Roundtable Vids and at AllStrikeVox on Twitter and Instagram. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. See ya!